science,
engineering,
medicine,
chemistry,
physics,
biology, humanities, cardiology,
computing, public health, global
science communication.
Hello everyone, I'm Gareth Mitchell. In this edition, as wildfires rage around much of the Northern Hemisphere, we hear about the collaboration that explores not just the horrific and tragic devastation, but also a long history of our relationship with natural fires. Also in this podcast,
my knowledge of what's coming has stopped me wanting to have children. Growing up, I always just assumed that one day I would have children. But I cannot bring myself to bring a child into this world knowing what is coming. I just do not think that is fair.
Wow, it's attention-grabbing stuff. You'll hear more from him and fellow researchers who feel much the same way. And we hear about technology to help in rehabilitation from stroke. All right, well, let's start with a couple of quick news stories out of Imperial College. Maxine Myers joins us first. And Maxine, this is a new test you're going to tell me about for predicting a particular kind of eye disease. Pick this one up for us.
Yeah, so this is a new eye test which uses AI that could be used to predict a condition that can lead to blindness. So this is a condition called geographic atrophy, a condition that affects mainly the over 55s, and it slowly starts impacting your vision, your ability to see. What's unique about this particular eye condition is that symptoms develop very slowly, and sometimes most of the time the actual condition's not picked up until it's in a much later stage, and unfortunately it can lead to blindness. There's no current treatments available for this condition, but early detection is really important so that they can start introducing drugs that can slow it down, the condition down, and help improve vision.
So how does this diagnostic work then? What do they actually do?
So this test called DARK, so it's called DARK technology. What's different about this compared to other diagnostics when you're doing an eye test is that it visualises sick and dying cells on the retina. So this is a thin layer of tissue that lines the back of your eye, and it sends visual information in order for you to see. So instead of saying an estimate of healthy cells, it can highlight the unhealthy and sick cells. And then by doing that, it gives an indication of like how the disease might spread, or like further cells that might die.
And so where are they at with this then? Is it being rolled out, or are we talking about trials at the moment?
So it's been trialled on patients at our partners at Imperial College Healthcare NHS Trust. So there was a clinical trial involving patients. So because this first trial has looked really positive and really good, they're now hoping to roll this out to a much larger trial so that we can see if we can replicate this data in a much larger subset of patients. The ultimate aim of the research team behind this at Imperial is that they want to be able to create a device that can then be used on the high street, so in your local optician, so it can be diagnosed at that level and at that early stage when you're going in for your routine eye test. They can potentially pick this condition up, and that's the ultimate aim.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for that, Maxine Myers. Well, now Hayley Dunning joins us. We're going to talk about bees, and in particular, Hayley, what a very novel way of looking at the way that bees move. Tell me more.
Yes, so researchers have looked into how temperature might affect bees' flight performance. So obviously with climate change, temperatures are rising, and we want to know how that might affect their performance, so their speed, their duration, how long they can fly for, because that obviously affects how they can pollinate plants, which is a crucial service for us because they pollinate many of our crops. Now, what the researchers did is quite interesting, is they have what they call a flight mill, which if you imagine is a kind of there's a vertical bit and then a horizontal bit, and then on the end of that there's a little magnet, and then they temporarily attach a little magnet to a bee so that they clip onto the end of that, and then the whole thing spins around as the bee flies, and that means they can measure the speed and the distance. And then what they did was measured bees' flight performance under a range from 12 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius in lots of different bees, lots of different sizes of bees, bumblebees this is, by the way, and then sort of made a model of how temperature affected flight.
So there's so much going on in this story, not least of all how they measure with such accuracy the bee flight. But I guess the really big story here is what they found then from this incredible sounding experimental contraption.
Yeah, so they found that from a lower tested limit of 12 degrees, the performance rose rapidly and actually peaked between 25 and 27 degrees C. That means potentially that in some more northern latitudes, so, the UK and even Scandinavia, where some bees live, that some climate warming may be slightly beneficial. It might help them fly a little bit longer and a little bit further. But obviously that has a large caveat, partly in that more southern latitudes will obviously warm more. Might get to those kind of beyond those temperatures a bit further, because beyond this they found that performance started to decline, and although they didn't go past 30 degrees, they imagine it declines obviously further past that, and that southern latitudes are more likely to exceed those temperatures more regularly and could lead to more local extinctions of bees. And even here in the UK, obviously the heat waves we've had in recent summers have been quite extreme, and so you can imagine that those kind of temperatures could be breached for several days or weeks in a row.
Where does this research go next, Hayley?
So they're looking how this effect of temperature can actually interact with other stressors. So we know when we think about bees, often we think about their issue with pesticide exposure. So neonicotinoids is a class of pesticides that have come under fire for potentially harming bees. And it could be that, if you have warmer temperatures plus pesticides, it's actually not a great story. So they're looking at that, and also how warming can affect pollination delivery across different types of landscapes as well. So how bees interact with their landscape.
Great. Hayley, thank you very much indeed for that. That's Hayley Dunning. And we also heard in the news section from Maxine Myers today. Now, Algeria, Greece, California, even Siberia. Summer in the Northern Hemisphere has brought wildfires with shocking devastation and loss of life and habitat. All that as last week's landmark UN report on climate change ahead of COP26 predicts it's all going to get worse. And wildfires, all aspects of them, have been the subject of a series of fascinating workshops this summer under the banner Wildfires in the Lab, Creative Experiments Through Art and Science. In a series of virtual labs to explore the subject, they've been looking at not just the scientific aspects, but the cultural and the historical and human beings' relationship with fires over the millennia. Adriana Ford is Centre Manager at the Leverhulme Centre for Wildfires, Environment and Society at Imperial.
The wildfires and the lab sessions are actually part of a multi-layered project that we're running at the centre called Wildfires at the Art Science Interface. And that's an ongoing collaboration between Leverhulme Wildfires and the Arts Cabinet, which is a London-based art research organisation. So the aim of our project overall is to bring together wildfire scientists with artists, and the aim to engage creatively and critically with the topic of wildfires from a combined art and science perspective, and then bring this sort of learning to a wider audience. So the virtual learning labs are actually aimed at encouraging knowledge exchange. So the artists and the scientists who were paired together, they paired for about 3 months working collaboratively. And then with the learning labs, they were sharing their experiences of their collaborations and their creative outputs so far. And also these outputs can be viewed on our online editorial as well.
Yep, and that's what you did. You brought the artists and the scientists together. They were all in the room, well, virtually anyway. So what did the artists and the scientists learn from each other?
So the artists and scientists collaborations are actually still ongoing. So the learning's still happening. What we've picked up so far, I'd say, is really around the value the participants have had and being able to explore sort of firsthand the different ways of thinking. But more than just a common understanding, it's about creating new knowledge together, sort of co-producing this new knowledge. But saying all that, some of the participants also said how surprised they are that even though they're coming from very different disciplines, that there's a lot of similarities and commonalities in their approaches as well. And also, I guess the focus of the project's really about process rather than just like having a final art output. And I think that's been particularly beneficial, really allowing sort of an open and free exploration and experimentation. We've really been interested in not using art just as a science communicator, but trying to understand, see how artists and scientists can work equally together to sort of produce new knowledge.
Yeah, because you might think that the art begins where the science ends. And this whole experience seems to suggest otherwise, that the art and the science can progress in a way that is kind of inextricably linked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't necessarily be, art and science are separate. And, a lot of scientists have, artistic tendencies, and a lot of artists have, scientific approaches as well. And they can actually work really well together.
And you've had three of your PhD students, they've been participating in the learning labs. So tell me a little bit about how they fitted in and collaborated with the artists.
So we have scientists involved in the project, including professors and PhD students from actually across our 4 universities at Leaving Wildfires. But we had 3 PhD students from Imperial College involved. So we had Olivia Haas from Life Sciences, Abby Crocker in Centre for Environmental Policy, and Simona Dossi in Hayes Lab in Mechanical Engineering. So quite diverse topics there. So their collaborations have been fascinating and really different, coming from quite diverse sort of research starting points. So Olivia, she partnered with the artist Aviva Ramani, based in the US, with a collaboration which they titled What Do Fires Think? So they started with global fire maps, which was linked to Olivia's research, and they have shared or created this sort of visual essay, and they had this concept of fire tigers, which is just wonderful. And then we had Simona, she worked with a ceramic artist, Anna Meyer, who is also based in the US. And with their collaboration, they titled it Predicting Fire. And some very interesting explorations around fire embers, titled What Do Embers Feel Like? And then different again, we've got Abby, she partnered with another PhD student of ours at King's College called Capel Yadav, and they worked together with 2 artists, so Maria Teresa Alves and Elisa Stinner, based in Brazil and the Netherlands. They named their collaboration The Need Fire, and they described it as an exploratory investigation into fire rituals, mythology, and its elemental role in ancient and modern societies and cultures. And Abby actually wrote a fantastic poem as part of her collaboration. So clearly she's a natural born poet, I think, as well as an excellent scientist.
And so finally then, this whole thing must seem to be about bringing out nuances in the theme of wildfires. And we have seen tragically in the news, obviously, the terrible destructive power of wildfires. And we can't obviously ignore that. But I suppose this project is about moving that on, acknowledging that, obviously, but also speaking about some of the nuances relating to wildfire.
Yeah, absolutely. We are seeing devastating fires in many places across the world. But as you said, it's not just about the devastating and destructive fires. As important as they are, how does it work in the Earth system? Feedback with climate, fire in society, policy, economics, its role in culture, fire at the wildland-urban interface. All requires an interdisciplinary approach to understanding, so which is what we aim to do at the Centre.
That's Adriana Ford discussing wildfires with me. And in a related vein, we've been given the opportunity to play you some excerpts from a podcast about climate change, and specifically the lives and motivations and personal challenges facing those who research it. The podcast is called Tipping Points, and it's produced by Peter Knapp, who's an Imperial PhD student researching indoor air quality. His guests are scientists across various disciplines who've joined the Extinction Rebellion movement. Pete's interested in what made the researchers take such a step and what it's meant for their careers and reputation. The interviewees also talk candidly about how the issue has affected their personal life and relationships too. Pete himself is a member of Scientists for Extinction Rebellion, so he brings his own experiences to the discussions. What you'll hear now is a series of short clips, different scientists, different perspectives. Pete will introduce them as we go along. First, ecologist Professor Jeff Varga, OBE.
North America and other what we would call sort of pioneer civilizations, where immigrants had come in from Europe and colonized an area, displaced the indigenous peoples, Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, that they still had wilderness. And they valued that wilderness enormously and protected it. And in Europe, we don't have wilderness. There isn't an inch of Europe that isn't managed to look as it is. Some of it's wild and natural, and that's wonderful, but we manage it all. Whereas by definition, wilderness in Australia or New Zealand or the US is just left alone. And that's a beautiful thing, and people love it. And even if you want to go to a national park in America, you have to get on a sign-up sheet because they're only letting in 10 people a week.
And Dr. Cara Leng, a car impact engineer.
No, I don't talk about it too much at work. They know that I cycle because I'd rather cycle than drive. And they know that I'm the one who's always got the vegetarian food in the fridge at work. But it doesn't get talked about as much as I would like.
Why do you think that is?
It's very difficult, isn't it? Because without business as usual, do I still have a job? Now, at the same time, as an engineer working in engineering, yes, I think I do, but I think my job needs to change.
And here is Dr. Charlie Gardner, a conservationist.
My knowledge of what's coming has stopped me wanting to have children. Growing up, I always just assumed that one day I would have children. And yeah, I love children. I love my nephews and nieces, but I cannot bring myself to bring a child into this world knowing what is coming. I just do not think that is fair. Humanity has sort of had this assumption that time is progress and that things are always getting better and better and better. We're starting to see now that that is a lie. We see that now with the younger generations and millennials who are not able to buy houses like their parents were and who are suffering much greater income inequality than their parents' generation did. So in terms of our social systems and opportunities for young people, there just aren't the opportunities there that there were in the past.
This is Dr. Caroline Vincent, a consultant for pharmaceuticals.
I think it's hard to talk to your friends about the climate and ecological crisis because you fear you are going to be disappointed. You don't want to carry on banging on about it because then people switch off. The conversation 5 minutes later is about their latest holidays and what they are going to do and the flight that they are going to take. You thinking, oh, did you just listen to what I've just said? So I'm not having those conversations anymore because I'm thinking, well, I love you and I don't want to be disappointed. So I prefer not to talk to you about it, which is really a shame because I ended up not seeing friends that are my friends for years because I don't have a lot in common with them anymore.
And this is Dr. Aaron Thierry, originally working on food webs and is now doing a second PhD in communicating the climate emergency movement.
The more people that are active, then the more hopeful I can be. People are waking up. We're seeing that young people are leading the charge. And I think it's for all of us now to get on board and support them. And I think that's going to take people being on the streets, taking part in protests, but also lots of other forms of action and activism, from setting up new community groups to lobbying their MP to setting up solar energy co-ops in their town or whatever. There's so many ways in which people can express their commitment to take action. We do need to have this kind of confrontational approach as well of challenging governments and demanding of them that they act.
So, if you found any of that interesting and you'd like to hear the full interviews, search for Tipping Points or find it on the Grantham Institute podcast webpage.
Peter Knapp, and as he says there, you can access the full versions of those interviews via the Grantham Institute podcast website. Click on Resources, and the podcast is called Tipping Points. Look out for that. It's also available via Podbean and Spotify. Well, finally, we're going to discuss stroke now and a new digital platform for stroke rehabilitation. It's called OnTrack and has just won funding through an accelerator programme to be developed further with the NHS. Justine Alford of the Institute of Global Health Innovation has been hearing more from Senior Design Associate John Paolo Fusari of the Helix Centre, which is a healthcare innovation lab and is a joint venture between Imperial and the Royal College of Art. So first, OnTrack, what is it?
OnTrack is a digital rehabilitation platform for people recovering after stroke. It helps people keep track of how much activity they do with their arm. And a second part of it is it also motivates people to do more activity. Evidence shows that after stroke, you need tons of activity, like loads of volume and intensity of different activities to recover the use of your arm. So OnTrack helps you in measuring how much activity you do, but also motivating you and identifying the right activities for you to do.
And so what was it that spurred you to develop OnTrack? Why was it needed?
Well, the first thing was that looking at stroke, it's the largest cause of disability in the world. And still, a lot of people are having strokes. So it's about 1 stroke every 3 minutes in the UK. There's about 1.2 million people living with the effects of stroke in the UK. So just the size of the problem was too big to ignore. And also personally, I've had a stroke in my family. It has touched us quite closely. So my dad had a stroke 15 years ago and he lived with the effects of it for a very long time. It really changed how, our lives from one day to the next. So having that as a background and knowing how difficult it is to recover from stroke, we decided to start looking at it and working with stroke survivors and therapists to look at solutions that could help them.
So not only a huge clinical need, but also some personal inspiration in there. So what studies have you done so far to test OnTrack and what have they shown?
We developed the first prototypes about 3 years ago and we did some pilot testing of that. Most recently, we've done a feasibility trial in collaboration with Charing Cross Hospital. So recruiting patients from the stroke wards there and following them once they were discharged home. They used OnTrack for 12 weeks and we could see improvement in their activity when we were comparing week 1 to week 12 of about 62%. But also we've been looking at the confidence that they're building. So their anecdotal feedback has been that OnTrack is playing a major role in their recovery. Great to hear. So we think that we're on track to providing a solution that really caters for people's needs, and the feasibility trial is showing that.
So as I understand, OnTrack was recently selected to take part in the ARC Accelerator Programme, and as a result, your team won £30,000 funding to pursue the platform further. What's next for you and the platform?
Yeah, so that recognition was great. The ARC Accelerator forced us somehow to start thinking about the commercial opportunities for OnTrack and do a lot of market validation. So we had many conversations with NHS providers and private providers to understand how the solution could be commercialized. Yeah, so how could it be turned into a product that is attractive for them to purchase? So going on from that, we are looking at securing some funding to do some pilot testing with NHS and private providers.
John Paolo Fiesari talking there to Justine Alford. And that's it for this edition, but next time we have a preview of the return of the Great Exhibition Road Festival in October. And we're going quantum with an imperial physicist who has quite a story to tell. I'll tell you no more for now, but do come back next time. In the meantime, from me, Gareth Mitchell, and all of us here on the podcast team, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.